I always sat at the end of the table. Not because there wasn't room, but because no one ever thought to save me a better seat. It had been that way since I was a child, close enough to be included in family photos, far enough to be forgotten once the camera was put away. That Christmas was no different. The dining room glowed with warm light, gold reflections dancing off polished silverware that had belonged to my grandmother. The scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon filled the air, thick with nostalgia that never quite belonged to me. Laughter floated around the table, loud and confident, mostly coming from my brother Daniel. He always laughed like the world had already promised him everything. I smiled when expected. I nodded when spoken to. I played my part. Across from me, Daniel carved the turkey like it was a ceremony meant only for him. My father watched with quiet approval, his pride obvious in the way his shoulders squared. My mother passed dishes, correcting nothing, questioning nothing. She rarely did. No one asked how my year had been. No one mentioned my promotion or the nights I'd spent caring for Grandpa before he passed. Those details didn't fit the story they preferred to tell. Grandpa had been the only one who ever noticed where I sat. He used to wink at me from the head of the table and say, "Smart people observe before they speak." When everyone else dismissed me as quiet, he called me thoughtful. When I was told to compromise, he taught me chess. That night, his absence felt heavier than the snow piling against the windows. Dessert was served. Plates were cleared. That's when my father folded his napkin carefully and set it beside his plate. The room stilled. I recognized that motion, it meant authority was about to be exercised. "Now that we're all together," he said, "there's something we need to discuss." My stomach tightened. "Your grandfather's estate has been finalized." Daniel leaned back, arms crossed, already comfortable, already certain. Dad continued, "It's only practical that you sign your share over to your brother." The words landed like ice water. I looked up, genuinely confused. Why would I do that? My mother sighed, the sound sharp with impatience. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "He's the rightful male heir," Dad said plainly, as if that single sentence explained everything. "He'll carry the family name. The money should stay where it belongs." I felt something crack, not loudly, not all at once, but enough to change the shape of things forever. "I was Grandpa's family too," I said quietly. My father's eyes hardened. "You'll understand one day." I thought of the nights Grandpa and I spent talking in the dark living room. Of his hand squeezing mine when he said, "Never let anyone tell you your value depends on permission." "I'm not signing anything," I said. Silence fell. Even the Christmas lights seemed to dim. That was the moment I realized this dinner had never been about celebration. It was about control. And I was finally done pretending I didn't see it. The silence after my refusal wasn't loud, it was sharp. It cut through the room, thin and precise, like the edge of a blade drawn slowly from its sheath. My father stared at me as though I had spoken in a language he didn't recognize, one where obedience wasn't assumed. "What did you say?" he asked. I said no, I repeated, my voice steady despite the hammering in my chest. Daniel laughed under his breath, shaking his head. "You're being dramatic. This isn't about you." That sentence, "this isn't about you," had followed me my entire life. When my achievements were minimized. When my opinions were brushed aside. When I was told to be patient, polite, grateful. My mother reached across the table, touching my arm lightly, not in comfort but correction. "You don't need all that money. You've always managed on your own." Because they'd made sure I had no choice. "I managed," I said, "because I had to." My father pushed his chair back and stood. The movement was sudden, aggressive, and every instinct in me went still. He loomed over me, his shadow stretching across the table, swallowing the space I occupied. "You are not going to embarrass this family," he said. "That inheritance belongs to your brother." I stood too, though my legs trembled. Grandpa wanted me to have it. He was old, my father snapped. Confused. That hurt more than the demand itself. Grandpa, sharp, deliberate, endlessly thoughtful, reduced to an inconvenience because his choice didn't benefit them. Daniel leaned forward now, his voice smooth and reasonable. Just sign it over. You'll still be taken care of. Taken care of. I looked at my family, the people who shared my blood but not my loyalty. I saw the years clearly then, every holiday where Daniel's dreams were funded while mine were questioned, every time I was praised for being easy instead of brave. I don't want to be taken care of, I said. I want what was left to me. My father's hand closed around my arm. Not violently. Not yet. Just tight enough to remind me who he believed held the power. His fingers pressed into my skin, his grip unyielding. You will do as I say, he growled, low enough that only I could hear. Fear rose, hot and dizzying, but beneath it was something else, anger, old and solid. I met his gaze, refusing to look away. Let go of me. He didn't. My mother looked down at her plate. Daniel said nothing. That was when I understood, blood didn't mean protection. It meant expectation. It meant silence. It meant being chosen last and told to be grateful for it. I opened my mouth to speak again, to scream if I had to. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Richard. The voice came from the kitchen doorway, calm and unmistakably authoritative. My father froze. We all turned. A man stood there in a dark coat, snow still clinging to his shoulders, a leather folder tucked beneath his arm. Mr. Ellis. My grandfather's attorney. He met my father's stare without flinching. Not with witnesses present, he added. And certainly not when you're already on thin ice. My father released my arm as if burned. Mr. Ellis stepped forward, eyes briefly meeting mine. In that glance, I saw something I hadn't felt all night. Protection. And for the first time, I realized this story was no longer theirs to control. Mr. Ellis didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Authority followed him into the room like a second shadow, settling heavily over the table where my family sat frozen in disbelief. The Christmas lights hummed softly, their cheer suddenly out of place. Please, my father said stiffly, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. This is a family matter. It was, Mr. Ellis replied, setting the leather folder on the table with careful precision. Until it became a legal one. Daniel straightened in his chair. You can't just barge in here. I was invited, Mr. Ellis said calmly. By your grandfather. In writing. My breath caught. He opened the folder and removed a stack of documents, aligning the edges before speaking again. Your father anticipated this exact scenario. In fact, he prepared for it. My mother's hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. Prepared for what? For pressure, Mr. Ellis said. For coercion. For the belief that tradition outweighs intent. My father scoffed. This is ridiculous. Mr. Ellis turned a page. Any attempt to intimidate or force another beneficiary to relinquish their inheritance results in immediate forfeiture of the aggressor's claim. The room seemed to shrink. Daniel frowned. Aggressor? Mr. Ellis's gaze flicked briefly to my arm, where red marks still bloomed beneath my sleeve. Yes. My father's face drained of color. And, Mr. Ellis continued, the bulk of the estate was not divided equally. My heart pounded. The house, he said, the savings accounts, the investments, were left to your granddaughter. He looked directly at me. She was named primary heir. For a moment, no one spoke. The words hovered, unreal, impossible. That's a lie, my mother whispered. Mr. Ellis reached back into the folder and slid a single envelope across the table. It was yellowed at the edges, sealed with careful hands. My name was written on the front in familiar ink. I recognized it instantly. Grandpa's handwriting. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. The room blurred as I opened it, unfolding the letter I hadn't known existed but somehow always expected. My dear girl. If you're reading this, then they didn't change. I hoped they would, but I trusted you to stand your ground. Tears slipped down my cheeks. I watched you grow quieter so others could stay loud. I saw how you were asked to give while being told you were taking too much. You never did. I swallowed hard. This inheritance isn't about money. It's about freedom. You earned it by being kind when it wasn't rewarded, strong when it wasn't noticed, and brave enough to say no. I pressed the letter to my chest. Mr. Ellis cleared his throat gently. Your grandfather believed legacy was defined by character, not gender. Daniel pushed his chair back abruptly. So that's it? She just gets everything? No, Mr. Ellis said. She gets what was entrusted to her. My father stared at me now, not with authority, but disbelief. You planned this. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. He did. For the first time in my life, I wasn't defending myself. The truth was finally doing it for me. No one stopped me as I stood. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation, no last-minute plea for forgiveness. The room had emptied itself of power, and everyone could feel it. My grandfather's letter rested in my hands like a promise finally kept. Mr. Ellis closed the folder and gave a small nod. I'll be in touch, he said to me gently. Then, to my family, all future communication regarding the estate will go through my office. He left as quietly as he'd arrived. I slipped my coat on, my movements calm despite the storm inside my chest. My father opened his mouth as if to say something, command, perhaps, or blame, but no words came. Without his authority, he was just a man sitting at a table he no longer controlled. As I reached the door, my mother finally spoke. You didn't have to humiliate us. I turned. I didn't, I said. I told the truth. Outside, the cold air stung my cheeks, sharp and clean. Snow crunched beneath my boots as I walked to my car, each step lighter than the last. For the first time, I wasn't leaving out of guilt or obligation. I was leaving because I chose to. The weeks that followed were quiet in a way I had never known. Grandpa's house creaked softly at night, familiar and comforting. I dusted the shelves where his books still stood, untouched. I slept in peace, without bracing myself for criticism that never came. I paid off my debts. I set aside savings. I donated to the small library he loved and funded a scholarship in his name, one that didn't ask gender or background, only determination. My phone buzzed occasionally. Calls from my parents. Messages from Daniel, alternating between anger and apology. I didn't respond. Silence, I learned, was not cruelty. It was a boundary. One afternoon, while sorting through Grandpa's old chess set, I found a final note tucked beneath the board. Proud of you, it read. Checkmate doesn't have to be loud. I smiled through tears. That was the revenge they never saw coming. I didn't take anything from them. I simply stopped giving myself away. On Christmas the following year, I set a small table by the window. I cooked for myself, lit candles, and played music Grandpa loved. Outside, snow fell gently, just as it had the night everything changed. I raised my glass, not to bitterness, not to loss, but to freedom. Because the sweetest revenge isn't anger. It's peace. And it was finally mine.